Hello, everyone. We are moving on to our next in the series of our grammar lessons. We've already talked about clauses and phrases, the different kinds of clauses and phrases, independent and dependent. We discussed the mistakes that can be made using clauses and phrases. So we talked about comma splices, fragments, and run-together sentences. Now we're going to be moving to a new topic, subject-verb agreement. Whenever we write a sentence, we have to make certain that the subject and the verb of that sentence agree in terms of number and in terms of person. So if our subject is in the first person, our verb has to also be properly conjugated in the first person. That's just an example. We'll look at the various different kinds of conjugations, the kinds of agreement as we go through. So, background information. In most languages, a verb will change based on the subject that's performing the verb in the sentence. So, as an example from French, je suis, tu es, il est, and ils sont. In English, it would be I am, you are, he is, they are. So depending on the subject of the sentence, I, you, he, or they, the verb in the sentence is conjugated in a different way. Am, are, is, and are, they're all the verb to be, but they're conjugated in different ways. The subject and the verb have to be in agreement when you conjugate the verb. The first conjugation form we're going to take a look at is the third person singular. When writing in the present tense, most verbs only change when your subject is the third person singular. That is, when your subject can be replaced by the pronouns he, she, or it. As an example, I walk, you walk, he, she, it walks. So the first person and the second person are the same. I walk, first person, second person, you walk, and third person, that's where the verb changes its conjugation. He, she, or it walks. That's typically the case. It's not always the case, but as a general rule, we look to that third person singular, and we know that's usually where the verb changes. We walk. First person plural in that case. Doesn't change. They walk. Second person plural. Doesn't change. Now, there are a number of challenges that arise when we're conjugating verbs. These are issues that often lead to mistakes in the proper conjugation of the verb. The first difficulty, that first thing that can introduce a mistake or cause us to make a mistake when we're conjugating the verb is this: when there are words between the subject and the verb. As an example of an incorrect subject-verb conjugation, Sally, who loves the Smurfs, jumps for joy when she sees them on TV. What we have to ask ourselves here is, what is the subject of the verb to jump here? Sally is the one who jumps, not the Smurfs. But it can become challenging to know how we're supposed to conjugate jump when we have words, who loves the Smurfs, in between the subject, Sally, and the verb, jump. So the subject of the sentence is Sally, even though the noun Smurfs is right next to the verb. So make sure when you're looking through your sentence that you're connecting the verb to the right subject. A corrected version of that sentence would be, Sally, who loves the Smurfs, jumps for joy when she sees them on TV. Other examples, when you have words between the subject and the verb that has to be conjugated, that has to be in agreement with the subject. The 7 mosquitoes in my tent is driving me crazy. Again, that's wrong. It's a mistake, because this person is treating the tent, the singular tent, as the subject. He's conjugated the verb to be as is. There are 7 mosquitoes. The subject is plural. It should be that the verb to be is conjugated in the plural. So the proper sentence would be, the 7 mosquitoes in my tent are driving me crazy. The tent is not the subject of the sentence. The 7 mosquitoes are. My friends from school believes in the magic of Harry Potter. Here we have words between the subject, my friends, and the verb, believes. Remember that my friends is the subject of this sentence, not the school. So believes has to be conjugated in the plural. The proper form of this sentence would be, my friends from school believe in the magic of Harry Potter. The second major challenge for conjugating verbs properly. Difficulty 2, the verb coming before the subject. Sometimes in English, we can have verbs that appear before the subject of the sentence. And that can sometimes confuse us about how we're supposed to conjugate the verb properly. So, an incorrect example, an example of this mistake being made. On the hill is all the mountain goats. Now, the subject of this sentence is the mountain goats. There are many mountain goats. So the verb has to be conjugated in the plural. The hill is not the subject of the sentence. It's the object of the sentence. So when you see this sentence, or when you review any of your sentences to try to correct for subject-verb agreement errors, ask yourself, what is the subject? In this case, what is the subject of the verb to be? Who or what is on the hill? The answer is the mountain goats. So the subject is plural, which means that the correct example would be, on the hill are all the mountain goats. That verb to be is not in the singular, is, it's in the plural, are. Be careful. Do not mistake a prepositional phrase for a subject. The hill is the object of the sentence. In this case, it's the object of a preposition. It's not the subject of a sentence. Other examples of verbs coming before the subject. Is there any chips? The verb to be is comes before the subject, but it's been conjugated incorrectly. The correct version of that sentence would be, are there any chips? Make sure that you look for the subject and see if it truly matches the verb, whether the verb comes before the subject or after the subject. Who are the nice cat next to all the flowers? The corrected version of that would be, who is the nice cat next to all the flowers? There is many reasons why I hate Mondays. The corrected version of that would be, there are many reasons why I hate Mondays. The third issue, or the third challenge that arises when we try to conjugate verbs correctly. Difficulty 3, compound subjects and. When you have multiple subjects, when you have many things that are doing something, that are the actors in a sentence, they're connected with the word and. Be careful and pay attention to some specific rules of English grammar related to how we are supposed to use compound subjects to conjugate verbs properly. So, an incorrect example using a compound subject, where there are more than two things acting. In this case, more than two people, Sally and Edgar. An incorrect example would be, Sally and Edgar jumps. If I just had Edgar jumps, it would be fine. But there are two people working here. I could replace Sally and Edgar with they jump. So the verb jump has to be conjugated in the plural. The correct example would be Sally and Edgar jump. As I said, the subject of the verb here would be replaced by the pronoun they, so it is plural. Other examples. Spaghetti and meatballs is my favorite meal. Peanut butter and jelly is my favorite kind of sandwich. Now, these two examples seem strange. They sound like they should be exactly the same as Sally and Edgar jump. Spaghetti and meatballs. Aren't there two things there? There's a problem. English is, as we've said, a very strange language. There are many little rules and exceptions that we have to memorize. One of them is this. When you're looking at a compound subject, some groups of things are considered as one. For instance, spaghetti and meatballs is one dish. You have your spaghetti and you have your meatballs on top, and you eat it together as one meal. Peanut butter and jelly, they're two different things. They're two toppings, but you put them together into one sandwich. There is one peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So peanut butter and jelly is my favorite sandwich. Spaghetti and meatballs, peanut butter and jelly, they're examples of compound subjects where there are two things, but they're brought together into one. Oftentimes, you just have to learn by listening to English spoken and reading English sentences. You have to learn what the appropriate subject-verb conjugation is, or the appropriate subject-verb agreement is. Spaghetti and meatballs as a singular thing rather than a plural, and peanut butter and jelly as a singular compound subject rather than multiple items, multiple separate items. These are both strange exceptions. Difficulty 4, compound subjects with or and nor. This is another challenging series of exceptions related to conjugation. And really, what you have to do is memorize the specific rules related to how we conjugate or how we ensure subject-verb agreement between items in a list using or nor. When you have multiple subjects connected by either or neither nor, the rule is that when the verb only applies to one of two or more possible subjects, attach the verb to whichever subject is closest. Now that sounds complicated, but it will make sense when you see some examples. So, as an example, a correct sentence would be either knowledge or adventures motivate Gerald. There are two items in a list using or, knowledge or adventures. Adventures is the noun that is closest to motivate. So adventures is the noun that tells you how you are supposed to conjugate motivate, in this case, in a plural. If we reverse the order of those two, so either adventures or knowledge motivates Gerald, now knowledge is the noun that is closest to the verb being conjugated. So it determines, it tells us how motivates is supposed to be conjugated. In this case, in the singular. Neither Jane nor her children want a quiet life. Here, children, which is plural, is closest to the verb. So it tells us that want is going to be conjugated in the plural. If we reverse the order and we have neither her children nor Jane wants a quiet life, Jane, a singular noun, is closest to the verb. Therefore, the verb takes on that singular conjugation. It agrees with Jane. This rule does not apply to and, items in a list using and. It only applies when you are using either or neither nor. Other examples of compound subjects with or nor. So in other words, this further complication is conjoining or combining those other examples we've been looking at. Either Aunt Jennifer or her tigers is the focus of the poem. Now, this sentence is incorrect. Either Aunt Jennifer or her tigers are the focus of the poem would be correct. Because her tigers is a plural subject, we have or, so that special rule applies. That means that the verb to be, is, should be conjugated in the plural, are. Always when you have an or a nor, look for the subject or the noun that is closest to the verb being conjugated. Neither the tigers nor Aunt Jennifer are alone. Again, another mistake. Aunt Jennifer is closest to the verb to be, which is conjugated as are. But Aunt Jennifer is singular. That means the proper version of that sentence is neither the tigers nor Aunt Jennifer is alone. That sounds strange, but it does follow the rule of English grammar. I have here for you a slide in which I'm going to ask you to correct some examples of subject-verb agreement errors. What I'd like you to do is, when I pull up the example, pause the video for a moment, try to fix this error by rewriting the sentence, and then after just a couple seconds, I will move on to the next example. So, the animals in my house practices kung fu for hours. Pause the video and correct the sentence. Neither imagination nor innocence prevent the fact that chimney sweepers have a tough life. Each cat know how to drill behind the couch. Imagination and spirituality offers an escape from the sadness of real life. The cat's main concern are the 7 mice. Everyone except Sally's friends think that she is downright crazy. Now, remember that each of these examples is incorrect. There's an error here. Think back to those previous slides and examples that we've already looked at. Focus on the actual subject of the sentence. Find the subject, the thing, person, or place that's doing something, and then look at what it's doing. Do the subject and the verb of the sentence agree? In this next slide, we're going to go over the answers to these questions. So, the animals in my house practices kung fu for hours. The corrected version of that sentence would be, the animals in my house practice kung fu for hours. Here we have that issue of words in between the subject and the conjugated verb. The animals is the subject. I should say the animals are the subject of my sentence. The animals in my house practice kung fu for hours. So the verb practice has to be conjugated in the plural. Neither imagination nor innocence prevent chimney sweepers from having a tough life. The corrected version of that sentence would be, neither imagination nor innocence prevents chimney sweepers from having a tough life. The reason for that is that innocence is the closest noun to the verb, and we have a sentence with nor. That special rule for or and nor applies here. The verb is conjugated based on the noun that's closest to the verb. So, innocence is the noun that is closest to the verb being conjugated. It tells us how prevents should be conjugated. Example 4, imagination and spirituality offers an escape from the sadness of real life. It's the same basic issue here. Imagination and spirituality, they're two separate things. They could be replaced by the word they or the pronoun they. So, imagination and spirituality offer an escape from the sadness of real life. Remember, when you have two things or more in a list with the word and connecting them, they are plurals. they work together. They can be replaced by they. So the same rules that we discussed in relation to neither, nor, and either or don't apply here. The cat's main concern are the 7 mice. The cat's main concern is the 7 mice. Even though there are many mice, the subject of the sentence is, well, concern. The concern is the 7 mice. On Omnivox, you will see both these slides and a grammar worksheet posted. Please practice this concept of subject-verb agreement. And then, in the coming days, I will post an answer key for that worksheet. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, please remember to contact me by Omnivox.